Yeah, good evening, all the participants and our valuable associates. We are welcoming all the participants in our 22nd webinar and also welcome some of our foreign participants. Our today's webinar topic is very interesting. Our today's webinar topic is how does government spending affect the economy? It's a very much interesting topic today's webinar. So, in response to the financial slowdown, its impact on the economy, the government plays a key role by increasing its spending in order to boost economic growth. With so much spending going in this area, it becomes important for the policymaker to review whether the spends made by the government is actually promoting economic growth or not. Before we discuss the topic in depth, you need to be familiar with the terms like fiscal deficit, government spends, economic growth to create understanding of macroeconomics required for financial markets. So our today very interesting topic we are discussing the government spending effect on the economy. So the key role of the government has a huge role to play in the economy. Some of its key roles are as follows. We are discussing some of the key roles of government. Provide a well functioning legal and political system. Government provide a well functioning legal and political system. Any economy facing political or economic turmoil is not conducive to economic growth, since it has very little trust in the economy. Moreover, there is uncertainty in the economy and people are also unwilling to invest. The government needs to make sure that there is a stable political environment. It's a very important on the part of the stable political government to provide good legal and political framework. So, layout regulatory role to provide a competitive market. So, we are discussing layout regulatory role to provide a competitive market. There should be a certain regulation to ensure that the economy does not drift to the monopolistic situation. The government needs to think about trade policy with foreign countries, regulations on natural resources available in our country. So, stimulate the economy by increasing the government spending. This was one of the philosophies given by one of the renowned economists, John Maynard Keynes. He was of the view that government's role is very important when the economy is in recession or depression like situation, and the government should increase spending to have a pickup in the economic activity. So in this scenario, this is very important topic to discuss on. Government spending is boosting economic growth. So we are discussing the source of income. The major points of we discuss source of income of the government. So our first code of the webinar is today is government. So what is the main source of income of the government? All of you know, and we are also known what is the income. Most of our governments are having main source of income are taxes. So the main sources of income for the government are tax and non-tax revenue. Taxes include income tax, corporation tax and indirect taxes, while the non-tax revenue comes from public sector units like income from railways or public sector banks, etc. So majorly government generating revenue from taxes, it's like direct tax, like income tax or non-direct tax. And what is the expenditure of government? So increased government spending is likely to cause a rise in aggregate demand. Aggregate demand, which is also known as AD. This can lead to higher growth in the short term. It can also potentially lead to inflation. Higher government spending will also have an impact on the supply side of the economy, and depending on which area of government spending is increased. If spending is focused on improving infrastructure, this could lead the increased productivity and growth in the long run aggregate supply. If spending is focused on welfare benefits or pensions, it may reduce inequality, but it could crowd out more productive private sector investment. So the government spends can be classified as revenue and capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure includes payment of salaries to government employees, payment to minister, etc. Capital expenditure leads to the formation of assets in the economy like the building of roads, bridges, schools, etc. Now we discuss, we are aware of the source of income and expenditure of the government. So let's understand about the defect. There are very much important to increase the revenue part of the government. So government doing more and more expand or spend to increase the revenue part, and more of government spendings are very important to economic boost. So our today's webinar second code is income, because income is a very important task and play an important role in a human lives and also a government, because nobody governments are doing anything, any expense, when if they are if government are not generating a proper income. All over the world, the government revenue, government income plays an important role to their country's economic growth, because government are generating more and more revenue and also expend all the generated revenue for the developing their country in a form of development, in a form of different category development. So the revenue, the flow of income, the flow of money are circulating in the economic cycle. So the today's webinar second code is income. First code is government and second code is income. A budget defect is an indicator of financial health in which expenditure exceeds revenues. It is the sum of revenue account defect and capital account deficit. So the government tries to fulfill this gap through borrowing, which it does so by issuing bonds or borrowings from the foreign government. India recorded a government budget deficit equal to 3.50% of the country's gross domestic product for the financial year ended on March 2018. So we are discussing deficits. Do deficits matter? Very important question arising. The understanding of the government spending is not restricted to cost-benefit analysis. John Keynes in 1930s stated that government spending boosts growth by injecting purchasing power in the economy. Keynes also believed that the government has the power to improve the situation of economic downturn through borrowing money, because the money is a blood of the economy. The government can borrow money from the private sector and return the same through different spending programs. This mechanism did not necessarily mean that government should be big. So the Keynes theory suggested that government spending program is just to provide a short-term boost to help overcome a recession or depression-like situation in the economy. So they even suggested that policymakers should be ready to reduce government spending once the economy is recovered, so as to prevent inflation, which they believe would result from too much economic growth. So the physical deficit, if kept in a check, is not bad. The government in such a scenario can play the role of creating assets in the economy. These assets in the economy will benefit in the long term. However, if the deficit is out of control, it can pose a problem for the economy. Our Indian economy is mostly in deficit, and in some years it has become uncomfortably high. So, some of the consequences of the high fiscal deficit are high inflation, high interest rate, and high taxes in some cases. So, we repeat again. Number one, high inflation. Number two, high interest rate. And third one was the high taxes in some cases. So, when government is starting to spending, there are different targets of government where they want to spend. So we discuss the pointed where the areas where the targeted interest of the government. So we are discussing welfare benefits. This spending will help to reduce levels of inequality. For example, benefits to the unemployed enable them to maintain a minimum income and avoid absolute poverty. So, there is a potential higher welfare benefit could reduce incentives to work, but on the other hand, welfare benefits can also help the labor market to function more efficiently. So, first, so we request all the participants proper and concentrate on this webinar and write down all four codes, because the four codes we are giving in this webinar are put on or mentioned in your feedback form for getting e-certificates. So, those participants are newly or first time joining in this webinar, we request all the participants to please subscribe our channel SK Media Tech, because we are very hard work done to prepare a webinar in every Sunday and give more and more information to our participants, students, and those are actually our a very long term. And we also a non-profit organization. So your motivation, your dedication give us boost or give us motivate to do and continue this chain of webinar in every Sunday. And we also very much thankful to our team members, Dr. Purti Trivedi and Dr. Sujan Patel, for their dedication to prepare this webinar and helping to do webinar in every Sunday. So we are also thankful to those participants. They are regularly attend our webinar and join our webinar on a regular basis. I pointed the name of those participants, they are regularly attending our webinar. So we have planned to give him or her a special certificate on our 15th webinar completion. So this is our 22nd webinar. After completion 15th webinar, those participants are regularly attend, and those participants having maximum certificates of our webinar, we give them a very good certificates and appreciation letter. So continue the second expenditure, its pension spending. Government are an aging populations requires higher government spending, pension and healthcare spending, but pension has no impact on boosting productivity. So the third expenditure government are done is education and training purpose. If successfully targeted on improving skills and education, government spending can increase labor productivity and enable higher long-term economic growth. If government want to very high economic growth, or they want to increase the productivity of the labor, the education investment is very much important, and also they provide training time to time to labor to increase the productivity, and the increase the productivity is boosting our economic growth. So any country they want to boost their economic growth, they are spending some amount in their education system and training. So the education system helps to create or build a you can say effective or technical guy or technical persons, technical employee they get from the education system. And training also provide a basic need or basic technical knowledge to the labor and the employee to increase and help to increase the productivity in the private or government sectors to boosting and helping the economic growth. Infrastructure investment, it's also a very important area, because higher spending on roads and railways can help remove supply bottlenecks and enable great efficiency. This can also boost long-term economic growth. If government are spending more and more in transportation side and infrastructure investment, they are making bridges, they are making new railway lines, and they are making new good roads. So how smooth transportation created by any government of the world also boost long-term economic growth. If government are investing in infrastructure investment, the results shown in a very long period, but they are giving a very sustainable economic growth in the country. So this is very important area where government investing their spend or their money to boost the economic growth. So higher debt interest payments. If the government has higher debt and higher bond yields, then it can cause increased cost of borrowing. This spending will go to investors and have no benefit for the economy. So we discuss the area of the government where they spending money to increase or boosting the economic growth. Now we discuss impact of government spending on the economy. So the third code of our today's webinar is the economy. So now we discuss the impact of government spending on the economy. There is a high possibility that the rise in taxes will negate the impact of rising government spending, which would have aggregate demand unexchanged. However, it is possible that increased spending and rise in tax could lead to an increase in GDP. So, in a recession, consumers may reduce spending, leading to an increase in a private sector saving. Therefore, a rise in taxes may not reduce spending as much as usual. The increased government spending may create a multiplier effect. If the government spending causes the unemployed to gain jobs, then they will have more income to spend, leading to further increase in aggregate demand. In this situation of spare capacity in the economy, the government spending may cause a bigger final increase in GDP than the initial injections. So, however, if the economy is at full capacity, the increase in government spending would tend to crowd out the private sector, leading to no net increase in aggregate demand from switching from private sector spending to government sector spending. Some economists would argue increasing government spending through higher taxes would lead to a more inefficient allocation of resources, as government tend to be less effective in spending money. So now we are discussing in multiplier effect. Fiscal multiplier is often seen as a way that spending can boost growth in the economy. This multiplier states that an increase in the government spending leads to an increase in some measures of economic wide output such as GDP. As per the multiplier theory, an initial amount of government spending flows through the economy and it's re-spent over and over again, which leads to the development of the overall economy. A multiplier of 1 implies that if the government created a project that takes 100 people, it would put exactly 100 multiply 1.0 people in the workforce. A multiplier greater than 1 suggests more employment and a number less than 1 means a net job losses. However, government spending may sometimes decrease economic growth, possibly due to inefficient use of money. So, government spending even in time of crisis in the economy may not work an automatic boom of economic growth. So here we discussing the impact of government in the spending to increase and boosting the economic development or economic growth. Any of the world government, if they are spending lots and lot in economic development, they are spending money and boosting their economy for spending lots and lots. So the government effect, empirical evidences suggest that in practice government outlays designed to stimulate the economy may fall short of that goal. So before it approves any additional spending to boost growth, the government should have an understanding whether such spending is likely to stimulate growth and report how much uncertainty surrounds those estimates. Moreover, this analysis should be open to the public for comment prior to it is applied in the system. So in response to financial crisis and its impact on the economy, federal government has increased government spending markedly in order to stimulate economic growth. With billions of taxpayers approximate towards this effort, policymakers should examine whether the spending actually promotes economic growth or not. Government spending even in a time of crisis is not an automatic boom for an economic growth. A body of empirical evidence shows that in practice government outlays designed to stimulate to the economy may fall short for that goal. So very important, when better economic growth, more and more spending by government in a proper or various different zone are also booming or boosting the economic development. So now we discuss government spending or expenditure includes all government consumption, investment and the area of the improvement are the acquisition by governments of goods and services for current use. To directly satisfy the individual or collective needs of the community is classed as a government final consumption expenditure. Government acquisition of goods and service intended to create future benefits, such as infrastructure investment or research spending is classed as government investments. So these two types of government spending on final consumption and a gross capital formation together constitute one of the major components of gross domestic product. So, government spending can be useful economic policy tool for government fiscal policy can be defined as the use of government spending as a mechanism to influence an economy. There are two types of fiscal policy, expansionary fiscal policy and the contractionary fiscal policy. Expansionary fiscal policy is an increase in government spending or a decrease in taxation, while the contractionary fiscal policy is a decrease in government spending or increase in taxes. Expansionary fiscal policy can be used by government to stimulate the economic during a recession. For example, a increase in government spending directly increase demand for goods and services, which can help increase output and employment. On the other hand, contractionary fiscal policy can be used by government to cool down the economy during an economic boom. A decrease in government spending can help keep inflation in check. So, during economic downturns, in the short run, government spending be changed either via automatic stabilization or directionary stabilization. So, automatic stabilization is when existing policies automatically change government spending or taxes. In response to economic changes without the additional passage of law, a primary example of a automatic stabilizer is unemployment insurance, which provides the financial assistance to unemployed workers. This discretionary stabilizer in one when a government takes action to change government spending or taxes in direct response to change in the economy. For instance, a government may decide to increase a government spending as a result of recession. With discretionary stabilization, the government must pass a new law to make changes in spending. So, government play an important role to boosting economic growth. So, more and more expenses are boosting the economic development and economic growth. So, the main motive to taking this topic for this 22nd webinar to create awareness in a social platform to how the government expenditure is a very important to the economic growth. Many of the developed countries between 1945 and 1965 presumed that the necessity of expanding public spending and increasing the relative size of the government sector. The underlying philosophy contended that greater government intervention was the best, if not the only, way to achieve certain economic and social goals. Developed countries have questioned the validity of this philosophy in recent years. Not only has three been growing concerning the possible achievement of public spending, but there has also been increased recognition of the consequent undesirable side effect of tax financing. This has resulted in deliberate policies to curtail the growth in government spending and even to reduce its level. In the developing countries, the task of recognizing the economic structure and promoting faster growth also led to policies of ever rising public spending and public intervention. However, in the stagnant financial environment in which many of these countries found themselves following the 1973 and 1979 oil shocks, a similar movement to curtail public expenditure growth can be detected, often implicit in the public debate. Surrounding this policy change is the suggestion that an overly high level of government spending may adversely affect economic growth. So, is it too implicitly that countries with higher rates of government spending have lower rates of growth? Although this is an important question, direct impartial investigation has been minimal, with researchers coming to conflicting conclusions. Using a sample of 96 developing countries, concluded that a larger government size as a measure by the share of government consumption expenditures in gross national policy depress the growth of per capita incomes. This conclusion was largely confirmed by a more comprehensive study, which include along with four components of government expenditure a wide range of possible influences on the growth rate. For example, per capita income, the structure of production, population characteristics, and world economic conditions. These may explanatory variables were not delivered from a rigorously specified growth model, but were regarded as a plausible influences on economic growth. On the other hand, concluded that a larger government size indicated by the share of government revenue in gross national policy promotes economic growth by reducing dependence, especially in poorer developing countries. This was contradicted by the results of a later study. However, more recently employed a sample of 115 developed and developing countries for the period 1960-80 using a production function approach, concluded that the time of impact of government size on growth in almost all cases positive, with the relationship being stronger or lower income countries. So, interestingly used a Smith's equation model allowing for a non-linear relationship between growth in government and total economic growth. This model identified a weak positive effect which was absent in the equivalent linear model. So the reason for this confusion in the literature are readily apparent in a cursory examination of the basic data on growth, performance and government size. So obviously the empirical evidence presented in the previous section is hard to access, most especially because of an underlying controversy at the analytical level over the influence of government Government spending on economic growth, some would argue that all government expenditure, regardless of whether it is of a current or capital nature, has a deleterious effect on economic growth. So this is based on a view that centralized decision making, a lack of profit motive, and the absence of competition, all of which tying government operations imply that government production is always less efficient than private sector production. Assuming this lower productivity, any increase in government expenditure by increasingly the share of productive resource used by government would slow economic growth in the economy as a whole and may impede the accumulation of human and physical capital and the pace of innovation in the private sector. This conclusion would of course have to be modified as the proportion of government purchase of privately produced output in total expenditure increase relative to government on produced services. Others, however, would disagree with an unqualified endorsement of the efficiency of the market system. They would point to large non-competitive firms in the private sectors that are able to insulate themselves from market forces. Moreover, some would point out that if social returns are greater than private returns, the market system will break down and the private sector may well under is it in some key areas necessarily for growth. The structuralists in particular would go further implements to economic growth. Of course, much of this controversy over the growth effects of government expenditure arise from our incomplete picture, the growth procedure and the determinants of economic expansion, given that appear to be legitimate but conflicting arguments. It would seem necessary to adopt an empirical approach and examine available evidence on the relationship between government expenditure and economic growth. So the correct procedure would be to include government spending in general model of economic growth and estimate its impact after correcting for the influence of other explanatory variables. So our today's webinar last code was growth. I'll be discussing all the major tasks to take this topic to create awareness to our participants how government expenditure are boosting economic growth. So the fourth code of our today's webinar is growth, and I have 2-3 lines and also we thankful all the participants to regularly join our webinar, and also thankful our some of the participants from overseas countries, and also very thankful and request those participants those are not subscribed our channel till date, so please subscribe our channel, or those are first time to attend this webinar, to request all the participants to subscribe our channel, because we are non-profit organization, and thankful to our team, Dr. Purdi Trivedi, Dr. Sujan Patel and myself, Dr. Atul Kumar Mishra, and our team efforts are we are conducting a good topic webinar in every Sunday and also thankful again all the participants, all the scholars, all our overseas friends to regularly supporting us and motivating us to join this webinar, and also boost up to we are done this webinar in a continued chain. So thanks and happy good evening, and see you next Sunday. Bye and take care, and hope all your family are in safe in this coronavirus time. So take care your family, children, and all your parents as well as your loving friends. Thanks and see you soon and next Sunday. Bye and take care.